Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast. Before we get started, just wanted to remind you that we are brought to you by Jim South Street, down on 400 South Street, 40 years of the best cheesesteaks, hoagies, and fries you'd ever want in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. So check them out at 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. And now to our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 261. And for those veteran O&B Puckcast listeners, we're trying something different tonight in terms of the intro of the show. We've been advised by some people that understand analytics a lot better than we did in terms of podcast analytics. So if you like the goal calls, we're going to have them at the end of the show with some ads so that we can support our sponsors. Obviously, you've heard about Jim's in the beginning, but we're going to try and get right into the show and do that so you have content right away. So we are brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com, Summit Adjusters, Jim South Street, and of course, we are featured on HockeyHotStove.com, the hottest new forum website. It's got all the teams and great writers and podcasts. And of course, you can link to the O&B Puckcast on HockeyHotStove.com. So check it out. Hey, so let's bring in the panel. There's a lot of little stories leading up to a big story. And the biggest one we're going to start with is Rick Tocchet in front of the crowd. A big affair when he got hired. There's a press conference. And Chef, why don't you weigh in with the first thoughts about that?
I thought it was good. I thought he repped well. I was quite shocked that we actually got Docket because I was thinking it was going to be somebody. Was thinking he was ticketed for somewhere else just because he was going to get judged heavily by the player he was and not the coach he can be. So, no, but that's good for him. He's not afraid of a challenge, so that's good. So I was happy about that. A little disappointed that Bradshaw wasn't going to be staying, but understandably so. Nobody wants to be that, the bridesmaid and not the bride. So in every wedding, so it's good. So initially, I'm very happy so far with everything that was said. I think it was smart. Nothing really red flagged me yet, but we'll see, as it all continues here.
You got it. The great Dan Silver weighing in here. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's good to be on. Good to talk to you guys. It's interesting because from my personal experience, when a new coach is hired or new players brought in, it's all positive vibes, right? I mean, you think back to when they hired Vigneault, and he's a smooth operator, and we all wanted to like him, and we did at the beginning, and then we kind of saw what happened. John Tortorella, I think a lot of fans were excited about bringing in Torts and, saying a lot of the right things, and we saw how that went. So you kind of have to guard against, it's all going to be positive at the start, right, with Rick Tocchet. And that's not to say that things are not going to remain positive, but I think it's important to think about it that way. And the interviews are great, right? The press conference is great. And he's a guy that clearly you can see why a lot of people think highly of him around the NHL and why for the Flyers, it was such a no-brainer to bring him in. And I think, we'll get into it on the show. But the press conferences were great and the interviews have been great. And the theme I sort of get is he's basically brings a lot of John Tortorella's good traits, but also doesn't have a lot of his bad traits, right? Like communication is a big deal. And clearly the fact that John Tortorella would bench people, he scratched the captain, didn't really talk to him about why. Same thing we heard about with Cam York, sort of a lack of communication. The thing they've really stressed with Rick Tocchet is that he's a great communicator and he really enjoys working people. He wants players to know where they stand. He was a great NHL player in Philadelphia. And so he brings that experience, which John Tortorella didn't really have. And so I think that's been one of the themes is that he seems kind of like a Tortorella type of guy. But he's much better at communicating with players. And I think everything so far has been good so that we've seen. And I want it to work out. But I'm trying to also look at it a little bit analytically. So that's kind of where I'm at.
No, the general impressions a lot of people had. He's an ascending coach, and the Flyers seem to have caught him at a time when he doesn't have the problems of the facilities. He talked that day about actually having 3 sheets of ice, but they didn't really have a practice facility in Vancouver. He worried that there might be not as much commitment from Vancouver. With Philadelphia, he had no doubts. And there was a report by Jimmy Murphy subsequent to all of that Tocchet really didn't look that hard at the Boston Bruins because he was concerned about Don Sweeney. Sweeney and his penchant for firing coaches, maybe quick on the trigger, and the fact that Sweeney may be a little shaky in his job, and where would that leave him? So a lot of this, Shep, was that we heard Tocchet's the guy, and we heard Freeman at one point say, Tocchet's probably going to be the guy. And then he backed off and talked about TV. And then he kind of chastised himself. He said, I should have went with my instincts. Yeah, it was Tocchet. And a lot of that seemed to be Tocchet playing the market. Now, if you listen to Keith Jones talked about how they were as much being interviewed by Tocchet as they were interviewing him. Did you get that? Catch that from Jonesy?
Yeah, I did. And it's very reminiscent of what, when I always interviewed for big jobs coming up and down the line. I always tell, like people that are talking, or even when I interviewed people, like, do you have any questions for me? And a red flag is always, no, I think I got everything. It's like, how can you just sit there through this whole process, especially a big job like that, and you wouldn't have any questions? I think that's kind of foolish. So I'm glad that, they got the feeling that he was interviewing them too. So that makes me feel like, okay, the guy's thorough. I like that. I like the fact that, he was very measured in where he thought he could go and what he was looking at, not for the next year or two, because let's face it, guys, the shelf life for NHL coach is under 2 years. Under 2 years right now. It's like 1.9 years or something like that. Average NHL coach the last like 15 years. I heard somebody say it. I
thought it was like 2.5.
No, it's under 2 now. So, okay. So if you're looking for job security too, because let's face it, we don't want to all bounce around. We want to be secure in our financial life and also too with your family life too. If you're going to stay somewhere for longer than 2 years, then you feel like you can make roots. So I was happy with that. A lot of good things you heard, like Dan was talking about. The one that got me the most was the communication part, because in this day and age with these kids, it's not like 25 years ago that we got the internet now. So these kids are constantly looking at film, footage, everything like that, like videos, everything, even on the bench. They're sitting there looking at iPads and stuff. And when you bench a guy like Torts did, and you didn't give him a reason, or you would ignore them, or you had your personal whipping boy, that's not going to fly with this generation of kids anymore. They want to know why, and maybe whether and you got to take it with them too, that it's a good thing, it's constructive, because they want to know what they did wrong so they don't make that mistake in the future. Nobody wants to sit on a bench when you're a professional hockey player. You don't want to ride out like 3/4 of a game just because, So I really do think that overall, the most important thing that I saw that I really took away was that communication skills are going to be key. And I really, really am looking forward to that. I'm going to be looking at that all the time.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we talked about on our quick reaction show that we did the end of last week was that a lot of right now is just putting faith in Danny and Jonesy, because there's really no choice to do anything else. And I think the nice thing about it is that we know that there's a timeline, right? They keep talking about the timeline where this coming season is going to be one where Rick Tocchet has even said, people have asked him, what can fans expect this coming season? And, he's talked about the thing that a lot of coaches coming into a new place have talked about. We want to compete every night. We want the fans to get their money's worth. he talked about sort of like seeing some improvements with specific players that he hopes that fans will be able to say, hey, you know what, such and such player, we saw this improvement next season, and that is something to do with Rick Tocchet and sort of what he's bringing. But I like the fact that basically we have our timeline now. We know that they're maybe going to make some additions this offseason. They have some cap space that's available. Some of it's going to get eaten up with contracts for Tyson Forster and Cam York, Noah Cates. But it's kind of going to be a year of hoping to take some baby steps, get better, add some players. But they've all talked about how next summer is the one where there's a ton of money available. Rick Tocchet even said one of the things that attracted him here is that they shared the vision with him. And part of the vision is that we've got all this money coming off the books next summer. Kevin Hayes comes off the books next summer. Scott Lawton comes off the books next summer. It's another player that comes off the books next summer. What have we got here? Oh, Cam Atkinson's money comes off the books next summer. So Hayes, Atkinson, Lawton, their money comes off the books next summer. It's about like almost $7 million.
Peterson too, right, Dan?
What's that?
Peterson too,
No,
right?
he comes off this summer.
Oh, okay.
Peterson's gone as of this summer. So,
Right.
But a lot of the stuff, goes away next summer, and they're going to go after some big fish. So there's this timeline where, as Flyers fans, we know that we're supposed to be putting our faith in Briere and Jonesy and Hilferty and now Tocchet. But also, I feel like if this doesn't work out, where we're sitting here a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, and it has not gone well 2 years from now, that you can sort of, it's not going to make it any easier if they haven't taken a step forward, but at least we know that sort of is what they are aiming at right now. So that's something that kind of makes me feel better about it. And like I said, like Tocchet is saying all of the right things. I was watching an interview earlier today with the Philly sports guys, where Bill Matz was talking to Steve Peters, who was actually one of the video guys with Rick Tocchet when he was in Arizona. And Bill was asking him, what were his experiences with Tocchet? And he basically said, like, look, this guy loves teaching young players and any kind of players. He gave an example where there was a practice in Arizona, and one of the players, maybe Christian Fisher, one of the somewhat young Arizona players, wanted to work on something after practice, and Peter said that Tocchet was literally out there for like an hour working on like passing the puck off the wall or something like that with this kid, and that he like loves working with people, trying to get them to be the best version of themselves they can. He holds all of his assistant coaches accountable, all of his video guys accountable. And Peters was just stressing how accountability is key with Tocchet, and that it won't be easy for the people working with him, but they will always know where they stand because he will communicate with them, but he expects hard work out of them and greatness out of them. I like all of that stuff, right? And we need to contrast that against the fact that he's never had a great record really anywhere he was, except for kind of that first year in Vancouver, where I thought that team overperformed a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've got to kind of weigh all these things we're hearing about him with the performance so far. But all of it's going to come to a head. Like, we'll know in a few years if this is working or not, I feel like. So I think that's a big deal. Isaiah, you've talked about how, Briere has said that Tocchet will help them attract players in free agency. We'll see about that, right? Like, I know they want to make a big splash. We've talked about it. They would love to go after Connor McDavid if he makes it to free agency next offseason. I guess those are the kinds of things that they're hoping a guy like Tocchet can help with. So, I think that I like that there's a sort of concrete timeline where we should have a better idea of things. And we'll know next season, like, if the power play is just as bad and we're not seeing any kind of like incremental steps and growth with guys like Michkov, we'll be able to see. And the chef talked about Brad Shaw leaving. I mean, that's a hit. And as they explained it, we get it, right? Like, Brad Shaw was hoping that he was going to become the head coach here. And then when you don't get that job, it's kind of hard to stick around and work for the guy that was named head coach over you. I get it. But those defensemen really liked Brad Shaw. So if some of these defensemen take a step back this coming year, that's going to be a red flag too. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about Bradshaw. I think when you go through a process like that, and by all indications, we don't know for sure, but it does look like the runner-up was indeed Bradshaw. And if that was the case, if you're going down that rabbit hole that far, well, it's not really a rabbit hole, but just in a manner of speaking, I mean, to try and emerge and just assume your duties as the assistant coach, it's just when you're already visualizing yourself as a head man and you're verbalizing that to your prospective bosses, I could see why he bowed out. One of the things that, is interesting is that Luke Richardson has been rumored as the defensive coach that they'll bring on board. Yeah, it's going to be interesting who he has. He was speaking with Jack was speaking with Jackie Spiegel, the Inquirer, and he said something I thought I really liked. He said that he likes his assistants to have their own personality. The last thing he wants is a whole bunch of Rick Tocchet clones, everybody speaking with the same kind of voice. You want the same message, but you have to have your own personality and you have to develop your own relationships in your area of purview. So, I mean, I thought that was interesting that he pointed that out. He's not afraid of being challenged, as a coach, if somebody has a better idea. So it's not a big ego thing with him. So I thought that was interesting. Chef, do you have anything else to add with Rick Tocchet?
Well, okay. Let's talk about attracting other players and how realistic that's going to be. Because, of course, coming from Vancouver, every Flyers fan has on their wish list, hey, just make he's got a great relationship with Quinn Hughes. He wants to get, can he get us Quinn Hughes? I don't know if he can. It'd be great if he could. He's up in 2 years. He's got 2 more years left. You'd have to swing a little bit. If that's something that happens right away, it's got to be some kind of ridiculously huge trade. And who knows? I don't know how bad things are in Vancouver for that to even happen. But I mean, Flyers fans got to cool the jets. Just because we have Rick Tocchet doesn't mean we're going to get a Quinn Hughes to come here and that kind of thing. So I don't know how big his reach will be for attracting players, but I can guarantee you, because of his coaching style and what he gets out of his players, that he will definitely attract free agents and such to this team. It's just going to be who. I think the big ones are going to be, as like Dan said, with Connor McDavid. I doubt he makes it to free agency. If teams are smart, they won't. So, but who knows what
I think what I gleaned from the comments by Danny Briere, and Dan, you could weigh in on this, when he talked about agents let him know, that was a line everybody was hanging on in terms of attracting those agents. Perhaps it had more to do with players being repelled in the past by Tortorella. And I referred back to the Athletic, poll. Players poll. Maybe that was part of it as well. And I got one other point after that. Dan, you want to?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, that question came up at the Flyers town hall meeting. Someone brought up that Athletic poll where players talked about not wanting to play for Torts. I think it's not just that Torts is removed from the equation, but I think that you can tell Tocchet is a guy that if a player spends some time talking to him, I could see that they would want to play for him. Right? I mean, he's a genuine guy. You can just tell that he's a guy that you would want to play for. And Briere and Jonesy's response to the fan who asked about Tortorella in the poll, they said, well, the kinds of players we would want to be here are the ones who would want to play for Torts and want a demanding coach. But the reality is that, some guys just don't want to play for Torts, and you can't close the door on that. I think Tocchet also, players, he demands from their players, but I think it's just much more positive vibes with a guy like that. And, we'll probably talk about it. There's some interesting unrestricted free agents this summer Also, we talked about the RFAs, but there's a chance they could add a relatively important piece this offseason too.
Well, I mean, I would think, like we've said in the past, you would think they have to add a center and a goaltender. I mean, that would be they might not be of the quality, and they might be on a short term, might be considered a bridge, or some people might even say a Band-Aid. But, one thing Bill Meltzer was talking about, Bill was definitely a skeptic about hiring Docket at this particular juncture in the Flyers' trajectory. He said that his systems put a lot on the centerman, and what they have at center is just really bad. It's one of the worst situations in the league. I mean, they have players, but the quality and slotting them the way they need to be, they really don't have a 1. They don't really even have a 2, in my opinion. So you would think they're going to go out and get one, particularly with the type of systems that Docket is going to run. Now, he also said, Chef, that he's not necessarily always on the forecheck, although it's very important. He wants his players to play a certain way, and he can adapt to the personnel, and that's good to hear. And we talked about that last time. But I really, when I heard Bill say that about how important centers are, particularly with some of the things that Docket stresses, it would seem all, more to the point that the Flyers really going to have to go out and get somebody there.
Yeah, and I know we had that in our show notes, and then I looked at offer sheets and what the result. We have a cheat sheet for that in our notes too as well. And I'm thinking, boy, they're going to have to really make a ridiculously large offer in a trade for somebody to avoid paying out some of those fees for, if indeed, because if this system is so center dependent, and we have so many 3s and not even a 2 really, then you're going to have to make some big adjustments. And we talked about Cam York getting paid this year. He might get paid, but it might not be on this team. And then there's a couple other little minor things that can be done to make room, but there's not really much left to entice either. And what we're talking about, like we always talked about how it's a possible that we could offer sheet somebody, somebody out there looking at Tyson Forrester going, I could get him not too expensive, for right now, offering a little bit more or getting it around there in that range. And that's something we have to think about too, because that could really muck up the plans if the Flyers have their number and a team exceeds it and they don't want to lose him, so they have to match it. And I just really think that's a real possibility. I don't know why. I don't hear anything. I just think that if I was looking at the Flyers team, I would sit there and go, I want that kind of player, and he's got so much potential. And I just think that there's a chance. Hopefully it gets all locked up soon.
Yeah, I mean, you always remember with the and then I'll go right to you. To get to the salary level, more than likely a team would have to give up that first round pick in the draft for 26. So there's a lot on the line for that. It might more likely be the offer sheet is kind of like a threat where you work out a trade. Dan?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with Chef. I don't think that the Flyers are a team that people are going to look at and be like, I want free agents from that team. Like, other than Michkov, I don't think there's going to be too many teams out there that are like, we need to get Tyson Forrester and we're going to offer enough money that the Flyers can't match it. Because the Flyers tend to like their own players more than other teams in the league like their own players. I feel like if they were better, we would have been better than the fourth worst team in the league this year. So, like, I'm not too concerned about other teams coming after Tyson Forrester in a manner that we wouldn't be able to match in a realistic basis. And I think that they will keep Cam York because I think Danny Briere likes Cam York a lot. And that was one of the big reasons that Torts got fired, right? Was because it was kind of like the last nail in the coffin when Torts went after Cam York and basically said to him that if he re-signed here, he would make his life a living hell and he would bury him or whatever he said. But I heard it was kind of something like that. So, I think they'll re-sign him. I don't, the more I look at the RFAs this summer, I'm not sure that there's a perfect fit for the Flyers to go after that they would be willing to give up like multiple first round picks for, especially since they're going to have to give up their 2026 first round pick. And if they end up being really bad next year, that could end up being a really good player. So,
Yes.
The more I look at it, I'm not sure that going after like a big money RFA, like a Gabe Velarde or a Matthew Nyes, I'm not sure how much sense that makes. Or like a Marco Rossi. So, but however, there are some interesting unrestricted free agents. And someone on Twitter today asked, hey, if you had one player who the Flyers could target this offseason, who would it be? Now, for me, if I'm looking at the unrestricted free agents, the guy who's kind of would be a perfect fit here would be Sam Bennett, because they need kind of a sizable center down the middle who can, play a hard two-way game and has experience as a winner. So Sam Bennett is kind of perfect. Obviously, he's won a cup with Florida. They're going to make another deep run this year. They're making another deep run. The question, of course, is to get a guy like that who's going to be 29 years old. So he's sort of towards the end of his prime. To get a guy like that when there's going to be open competition, you probably have to overpay, right? Which, of course, a couple of people brought up. Yes, obviously, I'm aware of that. But when I look at the unrestricted free agents, he's the guy that fits the best right now, in my opinion. There's some other interesting center options like Mikael Granlund, Brock Nelson. John Tavares could be an interesting guy, right? But the question is, are they willing to commit the kind of money it's going to take to get someone like that when a few years from now, they might be the third line center, right? If Jet Lutsenko develops the way you want him and you're able to go out and draft Caleb Denoyer this season, this draft, and then you try and sign a really big money center, well, now are you going to be paying in 3 years Sam Bennett $6-7 million a year to be your fourth line center, right? So these are the questions. This is why it's so difficult to build the team through free agency, because you have to overpay for a guy like that. And by the time you're ready to compete for a cup, maybe he's not that effective any longer. But that was my answer to the question of a guy to target who I'd love to be on this team for the next few years is Sam Bennett. So that was my answer there. There's some interesting options. I don't know what they're going to end up trying to do this summer, but
Dan, quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question for Dan. Like, I know he plays center and wing, but I think he's mostly center. Would that fill your 1 or 2C?
Sam Bennett?
Yeah.
I think he could be a 2C, for the next few years. I don't think he's a 1C on a Stanley Cup winning team. I mean, part of the reason he's so effective there is they've got Barkov, they've got Anton Lundell. I just think he would be a good guy to kind of teach some of the younger guys and eat up a lot of center minutes for the next few seasons, but it just might not be ideal because of what you're going to have to pay him and how long of a contract you probably have to sign him to.
Yeah, and the term too.
Yeah, Brock Nelson is 33. He's going to be 34 next year. To me, you can get him maybe on a 2 or 3 year deal. And even though he's more of a Band-Aid or a bridge, whatever, that might be more practical. Well, he'll give you a professional center play at a level that's higher than what we've had for a little while. So that I would look at somebody like him. So yeah, we'll definitely be monitoring that. I mean, it's going to be an interesting summer, but you're both right. I mean, it's going to be the summer of 26 that really is the most compelling. This is the draft summer. Next summer, we're going to have at least one first round pick. It remains to be seen if we have more, but it will be more of the trade free agent summer in 26. But I think they expect with Docket here to make some kind of improvement, in spite of Danny saying, like the opening line, the first question, in fact, I don't even think he took a question. I think the first thing he said is that the the plan is still in place, and Rick Tocchet understands that. We're still, he saw our plan, and we're going to stick with it. Dan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, to give a frame of reference, looking at the amount of money that they have right now to spend this summer. So right now, their current salaries add up to about $70 million. And that includes Ryan Ellis in there, which they can put him on long-term IR, which I don't think they had to do this year. But they've got $70 million in salary. The cap is going up to $95.5 million. So right now they've got about $25.5 million of cap space this summer. Now the guys they've got to sign are Tyson Forster. Let's say he signs for 3 to 4. Noah Cates, let's say he signs for around the same. Cam York, maybe around the same. Now we're talking about, okay, now that's 12 million that you've tied up of that 25.5 million. So now you've got about 13 million left to spend. You got to sign Jacob Peltier. But you could put Ellis on long-term IR. So now you're back in a spot where they may have, 18, 19 million even after signing Cates, Forster, and York. Now I don't know what those guys are going to sign for. So they could have some reasonable money for this coming off season, but you want to keep next off season in mind, because if you really want to go after a big fish, you're going to really need to have a lot of that money available. But they do, man, they really are going to have a lot of money available. So
yeah. I mean, Dom Luszczyszyn's athletic model for salary had the Flyers with about $13 million left over after they pay everybody, according to their model. So,
and that probably includes not putting Ryan Ellis on long-term IR.
Correct.
Which they can
Correct.
do.
That's before Ryan Ellis. So yeah, your numbers are dead on. I mean, you should apply at the Athletic in case want some part-time work. But
I'm not a big enough Maple Leafs fan to work at the Athletic.
Good.
Twist that knife. No, but so we'll that bears watching. Let's put it that way. So let's move on to some signings that the Flyers did make. Nobody was surprised that Rodrigo Abels gets another year. That's a one-year, one-way deal for $800,000. What did surprise me was Oscar Eklund also gets the same deal for the same number, which I don't get. So I guess they saw something in the playoffs that he did. Abels is at least a call-up player who's a professional. You could put him on a fourth line. He uses his size well. His lack of speed shows up in certain occasions, but in a call-up situation, it's good to have a guy like that in your organization. And he had a really positive effect with the Phantoms. But, coming out of this weekend, Chef, one of the things that I heard from Danny talking about the Phantoms who could be Flyers. He talked about Lechenko. He talked about, Bump and other players of that ilk. But Helge Grans came up in the conversation, and he's talking about a 6'4" right shot defenseman who maybe LA gave up on a little too soon. They needed a little more patience for a big guy learning defense in the NHL. And he had a really good playoff. And Briere made a note that this could really be a big year for him. And then I'm thinking, well, sure, Risto is out until, January or something like that with his second triceps injury. Helge Grans has a chance to be a player and get a real chance with a new coaching staff.
Yeah. And we saw how much of a chance he got under Torts. Hell, I mean, if you're looking, at the defense, who else didn't get a chance at the time? Emil Andre. So this is a good chance. Now you have a more, let's just say, forgiving coach, a more nurturing coach. That this is where you have to see what you got with these two guys here. I was a little concerned just because I think Emil Andre didn't play as big. I know he's not a big guy, but in the past he's played bigger for what he was. It seemed like whatever happened with him, under, I'm going to say Torts, but it just seemed like at the end of the season, he was making the wrong, or whenever he got called up, he was making the wrong decisions. It seemed like he was gun shy on pucks. He wasn't, he was indecisive, I guess is the best term. And Helge Grans, he didn't even get, he got a cup of coffee, but it was like the coffee was cold already. It was more like an iced latte. So he didn't really get a chance, I don't think. And judging by what they saw with the Phantoms, I think he's going to get an extended look this season, especially, in preseason and, first weeks of the season. Who knows? But, I think there's a good possibility there. I think he's got, look, he's only 23, 24, he'll be 24 this fall. So it's not like, we all talk about how this defensemen take time to cook and they take more time. This is it. They took their time with him. And if Danny sees like something there, I got, like Dan said, you got to kind of trust until you're proven wrong at this point,
Yeah, no, I could see that. So that should be interesting watching him. I don't think that, Alex Monk can come to training camp. I think he probably needs more time. He's not like Lutsenko. He can go and work and play, in the NHL. The AHL, I should say. And Lutsenko is unfortunately in no man's land, and we'll hope if he doesn't make the squad, and he should make the squad in my opinion. His offensive game still needs help, and he can get him out of Guelph. He could still benefit from the CHL. And
looking at the roster right now, they could be pretty bad next year. Depending on who they have penciled in where, like they do have some spots where it's a little bit unclear to me who's going to be like third and fourth line left wing. Who are we looking at? Are we looking at like Jacob Pelletier, Nicholas Delorier, Alex Bump? Like, is that kind of like the combo of like left wings we've got there? And then we're kind of counting on what's that?
Gurbankin, maybe?
Gurbankin, yeah, I guess Gurbankin could be an option. Who knows what'll happen with Denver Barkey, but either way, these are guys who are unproven. Devin Kaplan, right? These are some of the names that are kind of looking at. Rodrigo Abels, maybe Elliot Desnoyers turns things around. But either way, after Tippett and Forrester, who I still have some questions about both guys. I don't know. That's kind of pretty weak on the left wing. Then let's say Couturier continues to sort of decline a little bit. And Cates maybe doesn't take another step forward. And then who are the other centers? Lutsenko maybe and Ryan Poehling. And then obviously you've got Konechny and Michkov on the right. Maybe Bobby Brink takes a step forward and Hathaway. Right wing is clearly our strongest spot. But then you go to the defense and Risto is going to be out for a little while. So it could get ugly back there. And we don't know about the goaltending. There is the possibility that if they aren't able to add a few relatively decent pieces, that this team could be pretty bad again next year.
Yeah, I don't see that. I think they're going to make a trade. I think they're going to try to patch up some areas until the kids catch up. I just, when Briere comes out and says, I hope we're done with, subtracting. Now we're going to add. I think he's just got to. I think everything about, I'm sure they talked about that at the season ticket holder meeting and it, certainly publicly and behind the scenes, even all the pundits are saying, don't expect the big summer like 2 years from now, but they definitely want to improve and start moving the arrow upward. That's for sure. Chef, any comments on that?
That sounds about right. Like in my heart, I want to believe, like Dan says, there's no reason not to believe that they say this is addition now. We're going to add players and that they're going to be better. This team will be better. There's no reason not to think that this early on because they really haven't done anything yet with this, now that they decided that we're building again. So right now I have to take it at word because I haven't done anything. So from this point on, though, every move that's made at the draft and this summer now is a full-blown, we're starting. And everything will be under a microscope, not just by me or us, or it's going to be by this whole the whole fan base. We want to get back to making the playoffs every year, and it's there's a lot of guys. I had one fan that wrote me that big letter last time we had our show, and he was like, Chef, they gotta sign a goalie, a decent goalie. They gotta get a stud defenseman and a stud center to even have a hope of making the playoffs. And then I'm back in. I want to see them do something first before I commit, because a lot of people are just like, they were fed up. We lost a big part of the fan base there, I think, and they don't want to be hurt again. They don't want to back the wrong horse, so to speak.
Yeah, well, 13 years stuck on a goalie with very few exceptions is going to do that. I mean,
yep.
Then won a playoff round except for 20 in the bubble. Yeah, Dan?
An interesting goalie thing, and maybe this is going to be a complete non-starter, but I don't know if you guys have been following the Hockey Canada trial. And obviously it's kind of hard to know what's going to happen. And I think, so, if you saw one of the crazier things I've seen in a trial where they basically got rid of the jury. So now it is a judge
twice, right?
Only twice. Yes. They had to,
yeah.
Yes. It's a wild what's going on with that trial. So I don't know what's going to happen, but if these guys are all pronounced innocent, which again, we have no idea what's going to happen. If that happens, I do wonder if, the Flyers and some other teams are going to try and see what kind of headspace Carter Hart is in. And if, I wonder if that's an option that they would look at. I tend to doubt it just because sort of the stigma of what's happened. But it is, and obviously we don't want to speculate on anything about the outcome or anything like that. But I do wonder what will happen if those guys are found innocent. If some team is going to take a chance on Carter Hart.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because, well, not funny, but, when we talked about this, when it was in real time and happening, remember we danced around it and people were like, they should do this. They should do that. Now, like, I'm not saying they look smarter or geniuses down the line, but these GMs and managers that handled it the way they handled it, people were saying if one of my goalies was accused of that, he wouldn't have been playing hockey at all. But innocent till proven guilty. Now let's just say you bail on your on the goalie and you fire him and you don't play him anymore and blah blah blah, and all of a sudden, like you said, God forbid, like this whole thing gets thrown out, or they get found innocent. Imagine the repercussions of lawsuits from these players because of this. And I'm not judging right or wrong. I'm just saying, monetarily rise. That's why everybody was very, very careful about how they talked about this and what they did until they were charged. There was really nothing that anybody could really do.
Yeah,
correct.
No, it's right. Everybody's just following the lawyer's advice. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know what happened behind the scenes with the teams and the players. So there's a lot there, but they're just so desperate for a goalie that it's just, it is something I'm kind of thinking about.
Yeah.
They'll do something besides Carter Hart, in my opinion. I'm not exactly going out on a limb saying that, but I think one thing that did come to mind now that you're talking about the goaltending, I know there have been rumors about some names on the staff for Rick Tocchet. One of them came up with Mark Recchi coaching the forwards and the power play. That is just a rumor. I have no confirmation. I heard one pundit speculate. I forget who it was. I wish I could credit them, but they may be happy. I can't think of them if it turns out not to be the case. But also another name that came up was Ian Clark. Ian Clark was, for the longest time in Vancouver, one of the better goaltending coaches in the entire league. I know right now Kim Dillaball's the coach, but I'm wondering if with the results ever since Hart left the scene, really, it's just been an absolute disaster in net. If Rick Tocchet said, we have the opportunity to get Ian Clark, I know you've talked to Kim Dillaball, but things happen when you're making staff changes. Mm-hmm. Chef, he's really been there for a long time. And I remember speaking with Kevin Woodley, who we had on the show. He couldn't say enough good things about Ian Clark at that time.
Yeah, it was funny that you bring that up because I was going to ask you what we talked about Brad Shaw leaving, and because it wasn't, he wasn't going to be, staying here for work for somebody else that when he didn't get the job. But I was wondering what kind of does that put the only other person that was retained was Dillenbaugh, right? So
I think
where does that put him at?
Yeah.
And the what?
And a video
the replay guy. That guy, he was like what? He was 100%. Yeah. So
something. Yeah.
Yeah, he was up there, high 90s or 100%.
So they've been here for a while anyway. Yeah.
He earned his spot, so he earned his colors there. So I was just wondering, new broom sweeps clean. Very rarely do you take over a position and you want your if you're coming in as the general or the coach, you want your lieutenants and captains to be who you feel you can turn to. There are rare situations where you hit it off with somebody that's made a job that you meet at a job and you're like, you know what, I really like that guy. I want him to stay. I can build around him. So who knows? I mean, I can totally see it going either way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, gents, we just have a couple more topics before we close out. We want to talk about a couple of things with Matvei Michkov. He had an interview that was picked up in RG, the electronic mag that covers the entire spectrum of sports. And also he had been in an accident in Dubai, I believe. And they took Matvei's passport, and then the whole thing was a big scandal. The passport was taken by the rental car company, and they got an attorney, and the turnaround on this was like, 48 hours?
Yeah.
And Dan, what details do you have for the folks about that, if you can recall? Apparently, whatever they said about Michkov, he wasn't driving, and he was completely exonerated, and the rental car has a lot of egg on their face in Dubai.
I got to be honest. I saw that he was in the accident. I saw that he was fine. And then I saw some sensationalistic stories about the Russian mafia and all this kind of stuff. And I just sort of was like, you know what? He's okay. I'm not going to pay too close of attention to this because it's hard to know what to believe and what not to believe. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of decided that was how I was going to look at it. So to be honest, I don't really have much info in terms of the back and forth about what was real, what was not real, and whatnot. But it seems like he's okay, which is the most important part.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, are you okay, Dan? You're a little blurry right now. People can't see this.
Yeah, we're an audio only show. Yeah, my camera, I don't know what it does. The focus comes in and out sometimes. It's kind of like the Flyers' future. It's hazy. It's
opaque. Yes.
It's foretelling.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, now
it's
back.
Yeah, it's back now. So you know what? Because we're about to talk about Michkov's comments in that interview in RG, where he discussed his admiration for one John Tortorella.
Yeah, so that I can talk about. I mean,
yeah,
I think we all talked about from the start. Michkov is a super competitive guy who sometimes has been criticized for being kind of too harsh with his teammates. I think that was overblown a little bit. But there's a lot of similarities between John Tortorella and Michkov. They're both super competitive, probably to a extent where it comes out in ways that they probably wish it didn't sometimes. And I think that it's not surprising that they got along very well for the most part. I mean, Michkov even talked in that interview about how he would talk to Tortorella about non-hockey things, about life. And he was sort of a mentor for him a little bit. So I'm not surprised by that. Just from the outside looking in, I think people were like, oh, Tortorella is not giving him a lot of ice time. He's benching him. He scratched him. I think that was fine with Michkov. I think those two are kind of like two peas in a pod. And so that was not a concern of mine, was how Tortorella was dealing with Michkov. And I think Docket will do fine with him. I think the reality with Michkov is he is such he's such a competitor and he's such a hard worker that I think any coach is really gonna love him. The challenges are gonna be his commitment to defense, I don't think is ever really going to be there. I think one of the things that Michkov also talked about was that he prefers a coach that kind of lets him do his thing offensively, because it's when he's kind of being forced to do these other things that he isn't playing as well, right? I think Michkov talked about that, unless I'm making that up.
He needed more freedom and more
he
ice
needs
time.
more freedom. So I think that's always going to be kind of the thing with him. But my guess is he's going to be so good offensively that he'll get to do a lot of that stuff. And he's so competitive and he wants to win so badly that he'll do the things that are needed to help win.
Shep, Matvei wants a little more leeway, and he certainly talked about ice time as well, if you saw that piece.
Yeah, all right. Let's tackle the leeway. You give a leeway until it burns you, and then you sit there and go, okay, there's I'm sure they'll figure out, like, look, you'll have to, there'll be an establishment of acceptable chances taken, like situations and stuff, where you go, okay, you can cheat here, you can cheat here, you can cheat. If we're down by 2-1, I don't want you cheating. If you're up by 3-1, or 2-1, you could cheat or whatever. There'll be situational awareness. I think that he'll learn. Ice time. Now, we saw he got tired, and we saw he needed a recharge, and thank God. I think we're going to have a break for the Olympics this year too. So we had 4 nations, so we got a little bit of a power boost from that. But you got to be able to save. A good coach has got to be able to save players from themselves sometimes too. I mean, you can't sit there and say, "Hey, coach, I want to play 28 minutes a night." Blah blah blah. I can do it. I can do it. And then all of a sudden we're hitting Christmas, and he's like dragging on the ice. So I just think that there's going to be have to be a little bit of give and take there. I think there's a healthy amount of minutes, and we see if you do that. And also too, it's going to depend on what these guys come into camp, how they do. I mean, they're without the threat of torts. I don't think that they'll take off. I think they'll want to come in great shape like they've had in the past under him, just to impress the new coach. But there are going to be some people that take a little bit of leeway, I think. But let's just see what happens. I'm going to say that. I just think overall, if you're talking about ice time and stuff, that's going to have to be a give and a take thing too. Where, all right, let me see how you act. Especially, I don't know what. There's no schedule, so you don't know how many back-to-backs they're going to have, and how many home and homes and stuff, and that really affects your batteries when you're doing that, because you get hyped up for a game, and then it gets fisticuffs, and then it's a home and a home, and then you're back at their place, and they're all fired up too. So you got to take it in stride, I think.
Yeah, and I think also that Michkov is looking forward to having the kind of leeway and ice time he got when Bradshaw took over and things. You could see he just kind of elevated, and he wasn't. He blossomed. And, a good off season of conditioning, growing into his body. I mean, he's only 20 years old. Hopefully he'll get good training sessions in. I don't doubt his motivation. But for the people that might think, well, okay, we don't have the rope test waiting for us this year with Docket, they still have to impress a new boss. So I think there's an element of that as well. So, so we'll see what happens with Matvei Michkov and the Flyers in general. I mean, it's just going to be, I don't really talk too much about the Worlds. I've never ever really followed the tournament unless we had a young player who was good enough to be there, but it doesn't really affect anything. The only time I can think of, maybe you guys can come up with another, was Couturier was scoring at the Worlds, which is basically the losers tournament. They get all the players who lost in the playoffs or didn't make the playoffs. They go over, represent their country and all that. And Couturier had some good scoring and looked like more of an offensive player. And everybody's saying, see, our analytics are right. So you got to give Couturier more of a chance. And of course, the next year, I think that Couturier was a top line center, and they moved Giroux to wing. So I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. And Coots earned his sulky. But other than that, I can't think of another player where anything at the Worlds made any difference about anything. So I don't really talk about it.
Well, we were excited about Cutter Gauthier last year at the Worlds, and then we know what happened with that. He was scoring so many goals in the Worlds. I mean, that was kind of exciting. But you mentioning Couturier, I did want to mention last offseason, I cautioned, a lot of people were talking about how excited they were for Drysdale taking a step forward and Couturier rebounding. And I sort of said, hey, let's keep in mind, both of these guys had procedures done last offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we saw that both guys maybe didn't really play up to expectations this season. So now I'm a little more positive that Drysdale and maybe Couturier can have a better season next year because, as far as I know, neither of those guys had procedures done.
Yeah, I mean, I remember saying something like Drysdale's going to take, you got to give him till like late January or early February. It's going to take a while. And it did. So Couturier was kind of in and out. He was certainly better than the year before when he got benched. So, so we just have to wait and see how things turn out. And, it has to be positive. There's no use being negative. No. I think Docket is a competent coach. They're not going to fall below a certain par in terms of what you would expect a coach to be able to do to help this team win. And beyond that, maybe all of the giddy enthusiasm that we saw last week, it was worth it. I'm just wait and see. I'm waiting, and we'll see what happens. I'm not down on it. I would have liked to have been inspired a little bit more, but maybe he's just the right guy for this time in their trajectory and their timeline. So anyway, let's close it out. The conference finals are here. You have the Stars versus the Oilers in the West, and then you have the Panthers versus the Canes in the East. Who you got, Chef?
Oh, I got on my pool for NHL. I got 3 out of 4 right, so I'm happy about that. So I think it's gonna Dallas coming out of the West, and I think it's gonna be the Canes coming out of the East. I think that's just the way I have it. That's the way I played my pool. I'm gonna stick to it. At the beginning of the season, I thought it was going to be the Rangers, and I really shit the bed on that one part of my French of that pick at the beginning of the season. But I still had Dallas, and go Dallas, because if they win, Chef gets money. So we'll see.
All right. Dan?
I'm going to be rooting for Edmonton and Florida. I want to see a rematch of last year's finals. I thought it was pretty good, very good final. And I like seeing as much Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl as we possibly can. So that's kind of what I'm rooting for. But honestly, the games have been so good. That's been the important thing. I mean, these games, game 6 overtimes, game 7 overtimes, obviously the Toronto falling apart in games 5 and 7 was kind of fun.
Talk about crap in the bed
to watch. And we'll see what the fallout is with Mitch Marner and John Tavares and Brendan Shanahan, and if those guys are back or not. But yeah, I just want to see more great hockey. That Edmonton Dallas series should be very good. That should be an exciting series.
Yes.
Yeah.
Worth staying up for, at least. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. A tip of the cap, by the way, to Mark Scheifele playing through all that that he went through with his father passing, and condolences to his family. He went out there, scored the goal, and then unfortunately, as fate would have it, he was in the penalty box when Dallas clinched the series. So it's just the way life is. Anyway,
his rival number 2, 55, scored a goal.
Yeah, there's 2 teams that have the look to me right now, Dallas and Florida. The only thing, Florida looks like could be a tired team. They're not getting anything from Tkachuk at all. He's clearly hurt ever since the 4 Nations. So, but I like Bobrovsky so much more than Anderson, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big edge to me. But I could see the Canes winning if Anderson plays decent, just because they're fresher and it feels like it's getting to be their time. So
yeah, I could see it.
Yeah. Because they've been, Florida's had 3 straight deep runs. So yeah.
One of the Canes storylines that I'm kind of eventually looking forward to is, they added a guy who many people think is one of the top 5 defensemen in the world, this Russian kid named Alexander Nikishin. I mean, he's basically like a modern day Scott Stevens with, I mean, he's a huge body checker. He's played the power play for St. Petersburg, and he hasn't been able to get in the lineup because, you know, they don't want to disrupt what they've got going. But I'm kind of hoping that one of the Carolina Hurricanes defenseman maybe needs to miss a game or something. And I want to see what this kid can bring because he could be a real difference maker. So that's kind of, I'm kind of interested to see if we get to see Nikishin at all.
Well, I think, was it Chatfield was, I think he's hurt. I think his name's Chatfield. And I think Brad Brindamore said he's not going to be playing. So
he's not going to have Nikishin playing. Okay. So
no. Chatfield is not.
Oh, Chatfield. So does that, okay. Well, I
don't
hope
know
we
if
get to see
is
Nikishin.
Definitely going to be his replacement. But I'm just checking their roster now now we've gone down this road. We don't want to leave people hanging. Chatfield is definitely out. They do have some other possibilities, but Nikishin could be in there. I did stick him in. So, although he's not on the roster in Puckpedia, so I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I know he did play against the Caps a little bit. So
yeah, he played one game. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
We'll see. We just have to see. Yeah, he's. I don't think he necessarily is ready to make a big impact right now, but we'll see. I mean, certainly potential's there for him to be a dominant player. We'll see. So we'll call it there. We'll call it a night with that. And anybody have some last statements to make before we call the wrap?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
That's Okay. So, Chef, they can follow you at Chef to the Left B
on Twitter. Yep. Or X. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah,
X.
That's all right. And Dan, you're at X and Blue Sky
D-Silver88.
D-Silver88. And you can follow the O&B Puckcast on both of those platforms at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, on Getter at O&B Puckcast. You can follow the O&B Puckcast itself on the podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and Amazon Audible. And of course, we're on YouTube and Facebook. Just type in O&B Puckcast and it'll pop right up for you. If you could follow or subscribe, whatever applies to your platform, we really do appreciate it. It'll help move us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast. We do appreciate those 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts. So that's all we have for tonight. Until next time, everybody. Thanks for listening and take care.
By Jamie Baker. Yushkevich wheels it back in. Lindros lost. Archibald takes him out of the play. Up with it is Recchi. Walks in front. Shot one, knocked down. Rebound, score! Lindros!
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.